Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the launching and roundtable of the Green Guide for the Philippines, the creative pathways to sustainability. I am Assistant Prof. Mary Christine Clarino, faculty from University of the Philippines Open University, and I am thrilled to be part of this afternoon's program as your host. This insightful hybrid roundtable is proudly brought to you by the Asia Europe Foundation Culture Department and the University of the Philippines Open University, mainly organized by the Faculty of Information and Communications Studies and Faculty of Management and Development Studies. This discussion is in celebration of this year's National Arts Month with the theme Ani ng Sining, Katotohanan at Giting. We are coming to you live from the UP Manila Museum of a History of Ideas and are also streaming online via the UPOU Network's website, Facebook page, and YouTube. This event supports several Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, including SDG 10. Hello. Hello. There you go. Kasi pag di pa gumana, doon ako sa gitna. Joke lang. Okay, so going back, this event supports several Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, including SDG 10, Reduce Inequalities, SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, SDG 16, Peace, Justice, and Strong Institutions, and SDG 17, or the Partnerships for the Goals. And now, to officially welcome everyone to this momentous event, let us all welcome the UP Open University Chancellor, Professor Joanne V. Serrano. Let's give him a warm round of applause.
Thank you very much, Mary. Isang maalab at mapagpalayang araw po sa ating lahat. It is my great pleasure to welcome everyone to this event titled Creative Pathways to Sustainability, which is actually a launch and a roundtable on the Green Guide for the Philippines. And of course, it features arts organizations working at the intersection of culture, sustainability, and community engagement. Let me first express my acknowledgement and heartfelt gratitude for attending this event today. Of course, to our partner, ASEF Culture Department Director, Valentina Ricardi. And to Ms. Karen Go of Asia Europe Foundation, of course. And to our faculty regent, Honorable Early Sol A. Gadong, the incumbent Special Assistant to the Chancellor and Museum Director of the UP Manila, Dr. Hani Libertine Achanzar Labor. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Executive Director, Design Center of the Philippines, Rhea Matute. Good afternoon, ma'am. Representatives from the Philippine General Hospital on behalf of Dr. Legaspi. We have Mr. Othello Pantorillo. Sir, thank you. And of course, joining us online, we have Assistant Professor Mark Lester Del Mundo Chico, Assistant Vice President for Public Affairs. And also, we would like to acknowledge joining online the DNR, ERDB, and the Laguna Lake Development Authority. So this afternoon, we are especially grateful to the Asia Europe Foundation, or ASEF, through its culture platform for their continued partnership and trust. This event marks the continued collaboration between UPOU and ASEF. For the past 2 years pa to, or two, yeah, roughly 2 to 3 years. For the past 2, 3 years, our team, LJ, who cannot join us today, and Francesca, and Diego here, and Raisa, has been working tirelessly on the Green Guide. And today's roundtable builds on that earlier milestone by moving the conversation from publication to practice, creating a space for dialogue, reflection, and shared learning. This initiative is led by the UP Open University through the Faculty of Management and Development Studies and the Faculty of Information and Communication Studies. For UPOU, we see sustainability not as a standalone concept, but it's something that cuts across disciplines, sectors, and communities. As an open and distance e-learning institution, we are constantly reminded that knowledge matters most when it responds to real context and lived realities. The Green Guide for the Philippines offers an overview of local arts organizations that engage with sustainability through their artistic practice. It shows how creative work, grounded in community engagement and spanning generations and geographies, can meaningfully contribute to a more sustainable and climate-resilient Philippines. Rather than prescribing a single path forward, the guide highlights diverse approaches shaped by local conditions, relationships, and constraints. And this roundtable, thank you very much for our resource speakers for accepting the invitation, builds on those findings by creating a dedicated space to ask more difficult and reflective questions. What needs to be reconsidered when we center artistic practice in responding to sustainability challenges? What roles can artists and cultural organizations realistically take on, and what kinds of support do they need? Today is about listening to these experiences, learning from one another, and imagining possibilities together. And of course, we are also celebrating this event as part of National Arts Month under the theme, Ani ng Sining, Katotohanan at Giting. For us at UPOU, this speaks to creative work that is grounded, of course, in truth. And this is, of course, in sustainability, always guided by responsibility. Values that also shape how we approach teaching, research, and open and distance e-learning. And of course, as a university, how we contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, the Green Guide was actually launched online last November 2025. And today's event gives us the chance to continue that work in a more grounded way by listening to Philippine-based arts organizations and learning from their experiences as we think about sustainability and practice. So muli, congratulations on the launch of the Green Guide for the Philippines, and I wish the resource persons good discussion. We hope that today's exchange strengthens partnerships, deepens understanding, and opens new pathways for collaboration well beyond this event. Magandang hapon po.
Thank you again for that welcoming message, Chansey, Joanne. So, welcoming message pa lang, marami na we were able to pick up a lot of things and how we can integrate sustainability in a multidisciplinary approach. Before we begin, may we kindly remind our attendees to please feel free to start preparing your questions as you listen to the discussions. On-site participants can write their questions on the provided paper and hand it to any of our facilitators in black, stationed at the back. You may also ask your questions directly later during the open forum. For our online participants, please post your questions in the comment or chat box on your streaming platform. For our attendees here at UP Manila, please be mindful of the cameras as we are live streaming this afternoon's event. Lastly, please remember to practice proper waste segregation, and restrooms are located at the back to your right. Now that's it for our reminders. Now, who's ready to dive into the inspiring talks on arts and sustainability? I've learned that since 2015, the Asia-Europe Foundation, or ASEF, has worked with several researchers to produce a series of green guides under the Creative Responses to Sustainability series. Each guide lists the 20 most interesting arts organizations addressing issues of sustainability. To let us know more about Green Guide, it is my pleasure to introduce to you our first speaker. She is a Singaporean national, joined ASEF in March 2023. She has extensive project management experience, specializing in events management, international relations, and cultural exchange projects. From 2018 to 2020, she was also a project officer at ASEF, supporting Mobility First, ASEF's travel grant for artists and cultural professionals, and culture360.asef.org. It is a digital platform offering up-to-date information and insights on arts, culture, and heritage from 51 countries in Asia and Europe. Here to briefly introduce the overview of ASEF Green Guide series, let's all welcome Ms. Karen Go.
Hi everyone, and thank you, Chancellor, for the very warm welcome. It is truly a pleasure to be here in Manila today, and together with my colleague, Valentina, who will be moderating the roundtable later. So the Philippines is a country that is both richly diverse, creative, and deeply impacted by the environmental changes. And I hope that today's discussion will open up many more doors for us to look at what the arts and culture can offer. So before we begin, I would just like to give a very short introduction into the Asia-Europe Foundation, the work that we do, and to set the context for today's roundtable. So the Asia-Europe Foundation, or ASEF for short, is an intergovernmental not-for-profit organization that was founded in 1997 and we're based in Singapore. So the foundation aims to promote mutual understanding and build bridges among and between people, institutions, and organizations across the two regions. In addition, we focus on strengthening Asia-Europe cultural relations through a wide range of activities through different thematic areas, including culture, governance, sustainable development, and economy. ASEF as an organization is publicly funded through annual voluntary contributions from the 53 partner countries that work across the two regions. So it's known as a process called the Asia-Europe Meeting, or ASEM for short. And the partner countries actually span Central Asia, East Asia, Southeast Asia, and Europe, with Singapore and Philippines being among the countries. The ASEM process is considered by the partner countries as a way to deepen the relations between Asians and Europeans, particularly at the cultural, intellectual, and most importantly, people-to-people level. So every year, together with partner organizations from the two regions, we organize conferences, seminars, workshops, and we hope to reach out to more people through portals, the digital portals, our publications, and a variety of online activities. And by nature, what makes ASEF really unique is that we work at the intersections of the civil society and the public sector. And this unique attribute allows us and the programs that we run to generate ideas, perspectives, and solutions that you would not normally find or engage with from pure civil society or intergovernmental processes. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the program departments that ASEF is devoted to is culture. And through the work that we do in the department, we promote cultural relations by connecting artists, cultural professionals, practitioners, policymakers, institutions and museums in the two regions, Asia and Europe. Our work in culture is split into 3 different projects in the areas of bi-regional policy dialogue, training and capacity building, showcasing through an arts festival, and also providing access to information and knowledge sharing. And one of the long-standing projects in the department and the organization is ASEF Culture 360, which is also where the Green Guides and the reason why we're all gathered here today for this roundtable falls under. So in 2008, Culture 360 was launched as ASEF's Arts and Culture Portal. And if you're not familiar with the platform, I would encourage everyone to maybe just take a look at the website at culture360.asef.org. For many artists and cultural professionals who are seeking to work internationally or across borders, access to reliable and timely information remains a very significant challenge. Many are uncertain about where to find relevant and up-to-date information, with defunct websites and often outdated information being a very significant barrier. So with that, Culture 360 was actually established or formed to fulfill this gap. So from finding the latest residency opportunities, latest funding grants in the arts and cultural sector, to the most recent publications covering emerging arts and cultural trends, we provide resources for those working in the sector to find out more about arts and culture in and between Asia and Europe, and we reach out to nearly 200,000 website users each year. Beyond being an information provider, we also publish guides, reports, and publications that spotlight the cultural activities of our ASEM partner countries. We explore the role of culture in climate action, and we map funding sources for those who want to work internationally. And working with other cultural organizations, networks, and institutions, we also organize and support a variety of programs, such as our hybrid residencies and media partnerships. And all of this work is underpinned by our commitment to inform, exchange ideas, interact, and collaborate with the arts and cultural communities in Asia and Europe. So this brings me to another collaboration we are very proud of, our partnership with the University of the Open University, University of the Philippines Open University. So together we've collaborated on 2 activities, the first of which is the 4th edition of the Arts Journalism Matters Fellowship. And this hybrid residency and mentorship program aims to equip emerging journalists in the Philippines with skills, insights, and tools to write in and about the arts. The focus of this fellowship is closely aligned with today's overarching theme on the arts and environmental sustainability in the Philippines. The journalists who are selected for the fellowship, they're here with us today, and they'll actually be either writing an article or delivering a couple of interviews that I hope will help to amplify these conversations beyond the room today. And this brings us to the reason why we're all gathered here, the launch of the Green Guide and our next collaboration with the university. So as it was mentioned earlier, ASEF Culture 360 has been publishing the Green Guides as part of the Creative Responses to Sustainability series. So what started with guides focused on Singapore and Korea back 11 years ago, and it was developed really as a practical tool for those working in the sector to assess the role of arts and culture in responding to climate change and sustainability challenges. So 11 years later, the series has actually expanded to 10 country-specific guides across Asia and Europe. And we highlight arts and cultural organizations that embed sustainability in their artistic practices, while also addressing broader challenges related to integrating culture and sustainability at the city level, national level, and the regional level. So apart from the guides focused on Singapore and Korea, we've also published guides in Indonesia, Australia, Portugal, Spain, United Kingdom. India is also one of our latest guides that was launched last year. And throughout the years, as we've produced more guides, one distinct point that has consistently surfaced is that while each guide's country context is very different, sustainability is actually increasingly embedded in the programming and the thinking of arts organizations. So at the same time, the need for new, creative, and context-specific ways of engaging and responding to these issues have never been more urgent. We started working with the university on this guide 2 years ago, and it was launched online last year. And it really is only the tip of the iceberg in highlighting a handful of organizations that give attention to responding to sustainability in their artistic practices. So it is our hope that these organizations can serve as local examples and points of reference for others who are working in the region and beyond. As a country with such a strong appetite from the cultural sector to engage in social and environmental issues, the guide has really shown us that the Philippines can creatively advocate for sustainability, inspire action, and imagine more sustainable futures. And that is precisely why we're all gathered here today. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to a very fruitful discussion. I'll now hand over the time to Francesca, one of the researchers whom we've had the pleasure of collaborating with on this guide. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Karen, for guiding us through the background and implementation of the Green Guide series. We were able to learn more or have a more detailed overview of ASEF and how it connects different areas and institutions, including policymakers, especially providing resources to these different sectors. Now, before we proceed, we would also like to acknowledge the presence of Chancellor Michael T., the Chancellor of UP Manila. Thank you, sir, for also joining this event. I'm sure our participants are truly eager to know more about this series. All right, everyone, I hope you're all still with us as we've got something really exciting coming up. For our Zoom attendees, can I see a heart reacts if we are all still wide awake this afternoon? And now, thank you. I can see a lot of heart reacts. And now, to keep the fire burning, let's move forward to our next speaker to officially launch and introduce us to the Green Guide for the Philippines. She is a cultural worker and independent producer with a practice spanning contemporary performance, new media, and hybrid formats. She holds a degree in sociology from UP Diliman and provides year-round curatorial, production, research, and arts management support for artists, organizations, and communities in the Philippines and internationally. Francesca is an ongoing artistic collaborator of Asa Jackson's The Filipino Superwomen Band, a performance work that charts the journey of the Filipino singing body from the pre-colonial epic chants to contemporary karaoke culture, which was invited to perform during Singapore Art Week in January 2026. Since the pandemic, she has actively supported the artist and activist networks in Quezon City, where she lives, works, and plays. Let's all give Miss Francesca Kasuay a big round of applause.
Hello, magandang hapon po. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for being here. My name is Francesca Kasaway. I'm one of the co-researchers for the Green Guide Philippines edition. And just to give a sense of process, this guide was developed over several months. We started from late 2024 into early 2025. And we did it through desk research, interviews, side conversations, and lots of back and forth across Zoom. Zoom meetings. Ayan. And I worked on this together with an amazing team, of course, from ASEF, and of course, from UP Open University. I would just like to acknowledge Professor Lorena Jean Saludades, Miss Riza Ana Alfora, and of course, with the guidance of Dr. Diego Maranan and Chancellor Joan V. Serrano. Ayan. Although I wear many hats in my creative practice, I came into this guide not just as a researcher, but as a cultural worker who moves between performance, community work, production, and care labor, often across very different contexts, from artist-run spaces to international institutions. A lot of my practice lives in the in-between, translating between artists and funders, between grassroots realities and formal frameworks, and between urgency on the ground and slower-paced systems. So while working on this guide, I kept recognizing things I already knew in my body, that sustainability work in the Philippines rarely falls in neat categories, that it's relational and often invisible, and that so much of it is carried by people who may not necessarily call themselves environmentalists or artists, but who do the work, who do this very important work anyway. And this research reminded me that creativity for many communities isn't a luxury or a hobby, it's actually a survival skill. So it's really meaningful and an honor to be in this room this afternoon with fellow practitioners, researchers, artists, and organizations featured in the Green Guide and who are already doing the work on the ground. At its core, the Green Guide for the Philippines maps 18 organizations across the country that are using creativity to respond to environmental and social challenges, from climate justice and food systems to indigenous knowledge, youth organizing, and community resilience. More than a directory, this guide offers various perspectives of how sustainability in the Philippines is already being practiced collectively and often outside formal recognized systems. The Philippines is one of the world's most climate vulnerable countries. We experience typhoons, heat waves, displacement, food insecurity, and more often than not, sometimes all at once. And yet, what emerges from this guide, from the research, the results that we generated from this guide, is not only the reality of this multiple crisis that we're experiencing, but of culture, which is a distinctly Filipino way of responding that refuses to separate art from everyday life. Across the research, one major pattern stands out. Art here is not treated merely as product. It's a process, so it's procedural. Many of the organizations featured don't start with exhibitions or performances or cultural products in mind. They always start with relationships, listening, and sharing the labor. Creativity becomes a methodology or a way to help communities reflect on their situation, understand complex realities, and imagine alternatives of doing. Another strong trend is a return to indigenous interpretations of art. Art not as commodity, but art as deeply embedded in our life ways. Rituals, care, caregiving, storytelling, food growing, weaving, and collective memory. We see renewed attention to ecological knowledge systems that already exist in communities, practices that were never meant to be extracted from land or people in the first place. There's also a clear movement toward community-embedded work. Rather than centralized institutions, many initiatives featured in the guide operate through barangays, coastal villages, farms, and informal learning spaces. They blur the lines between artist and organizer, educator, and activist. This decentralized model allows creativity. Sorry. This decentralized model allows creativity to respond directly to local realities, whether that's disaster recovery, food access, or cultural preservation. Youth leadership shows up strongly as well. Young people aren't just participants. They're the initiators, facilitators, and organizers using creative tools to mobilize climate action and peer learning. And finally, we see creativity functioning as crisis response. Art becomes a way to process trauma, rebuild trust, and create shared spaces for healing, especially in communities experiencing displacement, violence, or environmental loss. So what does the guide recommend moving forward? It outlines several priorities. First, stronger knowledge exchange networks so that regional initiatives aren't isolated and grassroots groups can learn from one another across the islands. Second, better documentation and archiving, especially of ephemeral practices like performance and oral histories, work that often disappears because it doesn't fit conventional formats. Third, policy recognition of creative methodologies. We need to acknowledge that art-based approaches are not merely decorative and are valid and essential to sustainability work. Fourth, addressing geographic imbalance, particularly the need for deeper engagement in Mindanao. Fifth, building intergenerational learning structures so knowledge flows between elders, artists, and the youth. And finally, this is so important, cross-sector collaboration. We need to connect the arts with the agricultural sector, disaster response, education, and urban planning, among many others. So these aren't actually abstract ideas. These are all grounded in the lived practices of the organizations featured in the guide. So today, we're also joined by 3 groups later in the panel whose work reflects these trends in very concrete ways. We'll hear from Aurora Artist Residency Program in Space about their place-based creative research and how sustainability begins with caring for people, communities, and ecosystems. From Youth Empowering Youth Initiative, we'll learn how young leaders are shaping climate action through peer education and creative organizing. And from Tao Foundation for Culture and Arts, we'll hear how cultural work becomes a bridge between heritage, community empowerment, and environmental stewardship. Together, they represent different scales and approaches. So we have residency spaces, youth networks, and cultural foundations, but they do share a common thread, which is they treat creativity as infrastructure. So not something that you add after a policy has been outlined, but something that is really intentionally right there, intrinsically part of the process, and acknowledging that it is something that helps communities survive, adapt, and reimagine futures in real time. So I'd like to end with this. The Green Guide reminds us that environmental change is not only a scientific or policy issue, it's also very much a cultural one. It lives in how we gather food, how we tell stories, how we care for land, and how we show up for each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cheska. I believe we all learned a lot from that talk, and some immediate key takeaways. I think we were all taking down notes. This event is very important as this is more than a directory. It is a guide on how sustainability is practiced in the Philippines. And it's also a reminder for us, quoting from the talk, that art is not a commodity, but it is embedded to our life ways. And I think it's very important to treat creativity as infrastructure, as intentionally part of the process. So thank you again, Ms. Cheska, for that very inspiring talk and a lot of good key points. So thank you again for truly setting the stage for this important work ahead. Moving on, as we build on this topic, allow me to introduce our today's moderator, who is an Italian national and has over 20 years experience in the arts and cultural sector in Asian and European contexts. She joined ASEF in 2009 and is now the director of ASEF Culture Department. To take the stage and kick things off, please let me welcome Valentina Riccardi. Let's give her a warm round of applause.
Thank you very much. A very good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here. My first time in Manila, I have to say, really, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you. I would like to invite the speakers for this roundtable to join me. Please come and have a seat and I'll introduce you. It's gonna be a really, really nice conversation because I think all of them, please, anywhere. Sit here at the end. Okay, I'll ask you for maybe just a big applause to welcome them on stage first. Thank you. So, I have with me today, starting from far, three representatives of three organizations that were in Guide, and then two representatives from the university. Does it work?
Check.
Is this one?
It feedbacks. Paki-mix lang, charas.
Is it okay? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. It's a bit noisy, but let me check my notes. Okay, great. So we start from Ted Villanueva. I'll just introduce each of you quickly and then we move into the questions. So Ted represents the Youth Empowering Youth Initiative, is the co-founder of YE, and he advocates for facilitation as a powerful tool for empowering young people and address social, civic, and environmental issues. And it comes from the region of Negros. Yes. All of you are very familiar with this, but I have to say for me what is also very interesting is to really have these speakers coming from different parts of the Philippines, because it's also been a very focus point of this research to really try and represent all the geographies that are part of the country. So cities, rural areas, different parts, north to south and east to west. So thank you, Ted, for being here. Moving on to Malu, the Dr. Maria Lourdes Jarabe from the University of the Philippines, Open University, social worker, educator, activist for over 25 years, involved in education, community development, gender advocacy, disability rights, and social protection. And she directs the UPOU's Office of Gender Concern. Thank you, Malu, for being with us. And then we have Grace, very welcome. I know that having her here, it's really a very exceptional thing, and I think everybody is so excited to have you here. I don't think you need a lot of presentation, but I will do it anyway. Dr. Grace Nono is with us, representing the Tao Foundation for the Arts from Mindanao. Grace is an ethnomusicologist and scholar of Philippine shamanism. She's the founder of Tao Foundation for Culture and Arts that promotes cultural revitalization and environmental conservation. Thank you, Grace, for being with us. Roselle Pineda. Hi, Roselle. Roselle represents Aurora Artist Residency Program and Space. She's a curator, dramaturg, educator, scholar, community worker, and artist activist. She's the founder and artistic director of our... I'm not sure if the noise is in the way, but hopefully not. Thank you for being with us. Let me see if we can fix. Yeah, all good? Yeah, I think it's better now. Yes, thanks. And last but not least, Diego Maranan. I had the pleasure to meet Diego 2 years ago for a project that ASEF has developed in Italy. And it was amazing in that you were in the capacity of artist at that time, artist facilitator, but you're also teaching. So all of you have such amazing, diverse roles and hats that you wear every day. So Diego represents the University of the Philippine Open University, transdisciplinary artist, educator, designer, researcher, exploring the connection and intersection of art and science and future imaginaries. You are professor also at UPOU's Faculty of Information and Communication Studies, and thanks to the connection we had with Diego, we commissioned the guide for the Philippines to the UPOU, so it's really a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for helping us facilitating that. And yeah, let's start. Let's start with this conversation.
Start. Meron ako. Hyper. I'm your hype man.
All right. So I have 3 questions for our speakers, and I'm going to start with the first one. I think both Corinne and Francesca mentioned that some of the elements that came out from the guide was this idea of building bridges between geographies, between generations, young and old people, between different aspects of the art sector, the environment, sustainability. So I'm going to start with a question about building bridges. I'm going to start with Diego. So Diego, from your perspective, also being involved in the conceptualization of the Green Guide for the Philippines, where do you see the most urgent need to build sector, regions, and knowledge system, and how is this able to strengthen?
Thank you, Valentina. So all of my answers will be colored by my own biases and my own interests, which, as you said, is the intersection of the arts and the sciences, but also in future imaginaries. One of the things that I've come to realize working in these intersections over the past several years is that the arts and cultural sector are not being actively called upon to help imagine the future. So the Philippine government has started to become more long-term in their strategic planning. We have the Ambisyon Natin plan. There is Pagtanaw 2050, which is the Science, Tech, Technology, Innovation roadmap. And all of these long-term planning initiatives of the government, in all of these strategic plans, arts and culture sectors are not actively engaged, or if they're engaged, they're only engaged in the sense of their economic drivers. So arts and culture, for example, as you can see in the mandate of the NCCA, their main role in the government's eyes is for identity, preservation, heritage, which is very, very important. So let me first emphasize that. Coming out of our colonial past, there is a lot of restorative work that needs to be done, recuperative work, but there is space for a more systematic and active engagement in future imagination. What does the future of the Philippines look like? And right now, it's only the economics, science, and technology sectors that are involved. And I also I represent these as well. I'm the research director for a Science Research Institute. But even I understand that the role of science, the role of the arts and culture and humanities needs to be more strongly enshrined in imagining the future. So that's where I would start.
Thank you so much, Diego. Yes, thank you for starting with this idea. I want to move to Roselle first, next. And looking at bridges more in the idea of rural, city bridges, also with communities. What is your idea? How can we work towards that in the context also of the research of the Green Guide and Aurora's work?
Not working, but my performative voice is enough. Okay, wala. Check. Daming nakukuha ng mic check eh.
I think this one works.
Okay. Sige. All right. It's working? It's working? All right. Sige. We can't help it. No? We're scholars, we're teachers, so we have to frame first, no? So coming, like Diego, no, coming from a performance and performative point of view, no, I never really thought of things as binary. No? So I'm always kind of moving. That's how I want to think of things. It's always from the perspective of moving and movement. And so when we think about things that way, I like Edouard Glissant's idea of archipelagic thinking, that you sort of meander through issues, conversations, contexts, sectors, and so on and so forth. So when we think about building bridges in relation to context of working with the rural and urban, I never really see it as some kind of binary, like rural, urban. No? But I see it more as a fluid conversation amongst these different contexts. No? So when we organize certain things, certain projects in Aurora Artist Residency, which is located in Dingalan, Aurora, the Sierra Madre Mountains, and also in the coast of the Pacific. No? We also think about projects that way. The conversations are, as much as it's very organic, but it's also curatorially kind of, parang the curation kind of sets a space for that kind of fluid conversation. So it's always relational. That's what Francesca was emphasizing also a while ago. And I think also Karine was also saying that. No? So hindi talaga siya issue. Can I speak in Filipino as well? Code switch. No, fluid languages. No? So when we think about projects, we shape it that way. So that's why we have iterative projects that comes from conversations. In that sense, the rural-urban is also addressed organically in the way we frame and we shape and the way we present our projects. So our projects are always made up of a curator, a researcher, and an artist, no? That converses with the community. Now, sometimes the community, most of the time the community is part of the research team. So that kind of conversation is very transdisciplinary and it seeps through different contexts as well. So some of the things that we're talking about, it really has the slippages in the urban spaces as well. So it might be an indirect answer to the question, how do we bridge? I think how we do it is we converse. We converse transdisciplinarily. We converse with relationally with environment and with different people coming from different contexts and different disciplines that bring in not only their expertise, but we're able to kind of able to shape themselves in the conversations that we're having. So I'm very careful with using transdisciplinary and not only interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary, because that melding together and being able to open up to that kind of organic, like movement is very important in how we shape our our projects. So does it make sense? I think one of the things that we do is to to shift the narratives of how we view projects. Not binary, but movement, like going from one place to another. It's listening to the ground and being able for the ground conversations to direct where we're heading. That gives us a lot of problem with institutions. But maybe that's another conversation altogether. But it's an ongoing negotiations. How do we let institutions and our especially funding partners to understand that kind of movement-based, fluid, and relational framework in the ground?
Yeah, thanks.
I hope that makes
I think, no, you raise a good point. I don't know if we will have time to discuss that, but I see the complexity coming from an institution to understand processes that are not formalized and don't follow specific system, because then it comes to funding, it comes to acknowledgement and so on. But yeah, we can maybe see if we have time to touch on that. I'll go with Grace next. Grace, for you too, the question is about bridges, but maybe coming from the point of view of the region where you are based, the work that your organization is doing with the land, with indigenous communities, with maybe with communities also of the people from the land that have that kind of knowledge, and how that kind of knowledge can stay with us also for future generations, so younger people as well. I don't know, what can you share with us from that?
Okay, thank you for acknowledging our work. I want to premise that there are many more organizations doing this kind of work. Organizations that work long before we even started. Okay, so just know that. The knowledge that the Tao Foundation is often engaged with is knowledge that is often, more often than not, embodied. The knowledge you might read in books, but what you read in books is just a fraction of the knowledge as lived in real time by living agents negotiating realities, okay? That said, if you want to know more about this knowledge, what you do is engage with living carriers, culture bearers. And when I say embodied knowledge, it doesn't mean that this knowledge is not also theoretical. Okay? So if you want to support local and indigenous knowledges, what you want to do is to support and recognize the living carriers as equal to, say, academic counterparts. Easier said than done. But have the intention and work your way in participatory ways towards achieving more parity. And know that support should and probably is always, it should be reciprocal. And know that even before you give support to these carriers of living knowledge, they may have been supporting you already for a long time by the way they, say, conserve places, ecosystems, using their own knowledges. Okay, so a lot of help makes things worse. So you don't just support from yourself. The support has to be arrived at in participatory ways. You have to, wherever it is you're coming from, if you're coming from the outside, the relationship building has to come first. Then you can together craft your way forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Grace. Before going to Malu, I wanted to ask Ted to talk about the youth, especially from the youth perspective. How do you see, because we talked about the cultural barriers, which normally I would imagine are people who've been with us for a long time, but then there's also the youth. And how is the youth actively involved in maybe creating these bridges? I don't know, thinking also about transmission from cultural barriers to younger generation, or how is the organization working towards building bridges with youth at the center of this?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Like Doc Grace also mentioned, what I will be talking about is not the entirety of the youth in the Philippines, but only the youth of our community, especially in the Negros Island, especially in Negros Occidental. So what we need right now, actually, to bridge those gaps is, especially from our the older or the previous generation. Well, to be honest, it's resources. We have the time, we have the energy, but we don't have, especially financial resources, to do those, to materialize what we envision, like, for projects and activities for our fellow youth. So, and aside from resources is space. Recently, we've been telling other young people to create spaces. And these spaces are so big right now that we are being acknowledged and being invited in the government, even in academies, to represent the youth. But it's not just spaces per se. We need safe spaces. Because, yes, we're there, but we feel that we're just there because you need a quota of young people to be present. Like, it's a requirement of the government to have young people, but it's not a safe space for us because we're there, but we're not allowed to talk, or even if we talk, we're not being heard, we're not being listened to. So that's what we need, safe space for us to talk and to share our ideas, because, well, if we follow the natural cycle of life, the previous generation will go ahead, and then with the things that going on right now, who will suffer the most? It's our generation. So I hope that we will be heard in these spaces because we have something to offer.
Thank you, Ted. I think Malu, is a good time to also take the angle of the gender, because I think that's also a very important aspect when we talk about cultural barriers, younger generation, older generation, but what about gender equality and maybe that point.
Thank you, Valentina, and thank you for all the insights that came about. Actually, as I was thinking about gender as an organizing principle for all of these, I remembered I was talking to Rosel earlier. I came across this radical thought leader who said that it couldn't be art for art's sake. Rosel is smiling. Anyway, if we talk about gender as an organizing principle and we talk about sustainability for the generations to come, it cannot be seen as sitting alongside sustainability, but rather it has to shape sustainability in ways that would answer certain concepts and constructs that were spoken of by the speakers earlier, like reciprocity, care, the space to be heard, right? So I think it's not, when we think of gender in terms of at the intersection of art and sustainability, I'd like to think of it as not as a scarcity of artistic creativity, the the talent that comes about, but rather, as I've heard, it's relational. And when we talk about relational or having to work with people, especially people with resources, we talk about power as well. So I think when we talk about gender in relation to all of these and how art becomes what? Not just art for art's sake, but art for whom and art for what? So I guess that's where the my chancellor is here, and I've mentioned this long before you accepted me to be part of UP Open University. That's where the activist character in us should come about. The art should be something that should radically move us to shift the narrative, change the landscape, but ultimately answer the question, for what and for whom? So I guess it's for women, it's not just the binaries, but we don't think about binaries anymore, but we think about gender, especially those genders that are marginalized, the other people that are marginalized. So our art should reflect the same. It couldn't be maintaining the status quo. Our art consumption couldn't be maintained, just simply thinking, how this should mean the status quo, but rather our art should speak of how to help people empower themselves, how to go out and live. We talk about lived realities, right? And how these lived realities would push us to make those accountable, answerable, like a scarcity of resources. We have so much talent, but these talents are what? Not optimized because of a lot of scarcity. So maybe it's also that kind of art that would push people to go beyond boundaries. Thank you.
Thank you, Malu. Thanks. I think, what really strikes me, and also reading the guide, what I thought was really interesting is the amazing array of actions that all of these organizations feature have and ways in which they connect. So as we said, it's very fluid, it's relational, it's reciprocal. There is, of course, always the challenge of how much this is recognized when it comes to policies. But I wanted to talk a bit about this way of connecting. So what you were saying, who is this for? It's not for the art sector only, it's not for the government sector to recognize, it's for all of us as communities and people working together. Like Roselle was saying, it's not about one person, it's really about the community. So I wanted to talk a bit about this aspect of the reciprocity, the care, and the work with communities rather than for communities. And I wanted to ask Grace, in your work, care and reciprocity, and are deeply tied to land, to ritual, to ancestral knowledge, as we already heard from you as an introduction. And I wanted to ask you how these values practice in concrete ways when working with communities, and what ethical boundaries help prevent, representation, wrong representation, or extractive engagement, but really how these people are working together towards something, but not just, taken into account as a representation.
Thank you, Valentina. Whether engaging with land or with a community, in my experience of learning how to better relate, the first thing to do is to ask permission. And this is a deeply indigenous way of doing things. Before you till a field, you ask permission, because long before you have arrived, there are already inhabitants there, seen and unseen. In other words, relating as spiritual practice. There are limits to what your empirical faculties can apprehend. Again, this is a deeply indigenous way of being, okay? And if we have been disconnected from such ways, it is worth looking into again. We've been so colonized in our beings, and okay, asking permission. Presenting or communicating what your intentions are, whether you're facing land or a community. What is it you're wanting? And asking for a response. What is it for? Who benefits from it? How will it be carried out? And if it's a community, you can go straight to the leaders and know that in my part of the Philippines, the leaders distinguish between leaders, tribal leaders, and tribal dealers, or those who are still part of the community, but whose loyalties have shifted towards, say, big business interests. Okay? So, know who you're dealing with. Now, you can also go through NCIP, National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, and they have a lengthy process of free, prior, and informed consent. Okay? Be ready for a long and expensive process. It could happen, yeah? But it's in my experience, it's good to first have a relationship with leaders who have conservation, for example, at heart, so that they can be your allies when you are applying for free, prior, and informed consent from the NCIP. Okay? That way, you have already established that relationship. But yeah, you can go through the FPIC process, and that will outline that whatever the benefits are arrived at by your collective project will be shared. Now, a lot of research, for example, treats, say, culture bearers as sources of information. So they do not become part of the whole process up to the end, if there is such a thing, yeah? So that is something to look into, to make sure that your relationship, your engagement is not one shot. It should grow and continue and evolve and deepen. I hope that helps.
Yes,
Thank you.
I think so. Thank you. Maybe, Roselle, what is your experience in this sense? So what are your ways of working, and how can you make sure that there is the right care in involving everyone in this process, as you were describing, in terms of the work that the residency program and the organization is doing?
Yeah. Siguro, first of all, let's just put it out there that care work, especially with vulnerable peoples, is hard work. So it doesn't stop really from FPIC. It's a continuous relationship, like what Ma'am Grace has been talking about, no? But siguro just to take off from the steps that Doc Grace was saying, no? Relationships is very important, and probably I'll give some kind of information, because not all communities have a functioning and politically unbiased NCIP. Most of the time, in a lot of sorry, kailangan kong maging outright dito. Kasi we experience that as community workers, and we're not gonna sugarcoat what we experience on the ground in relation to institutions. In our experience, for instance, our area is conflict area, so it's militarized. The NCIP is most of the time backing Kaliwa Dam projects. So it's really hard to navigate that. So it's very important what Doc Grace was saying, to build relationships with the community. Because there was a time that the NCIP actually kind of blocked our projects. But the community this is the essence of ethics with vulnerable peoples, especially indigenous people. Self-determination is at the core. Sariling pagpapasya. Whether or not they want to continue a traditional project that you think is very important to continue, but the community doesn't want to, suck it up. Because they didn't want to do that, not at that time at least. Continue with the conversations. Because the community has its own timeline. So, self-determination o sariling pagpapasya is very important. It's a very important value or core value in ethical relationships or ethical work and care work with vulnerable communities especially. So when the time came that the NCIUP actually kind of blocked one of our projects, the community stood up for it. The community superseded all the FPIC bureaucratic, expensive process that Doc Grace was saying, and it's really expensive. Saka na rin na, we will talk about that with institutions. But the community stood up for it. The community, and then the offshoot, the outcome of that conversation of the community standing up and exercising their self-determination is that we were able to have and shape our community-based ethics protocol for collaborating with communities. Of course, that's ideal, but that is hard work. Like what Doc Grace was saying, embodiment, in these communities, embodiment of lived experiences. I'm an outsider, so there's probably limitations to what I can embody in terms of cultural experiences that most of our community partners, but that's also part of ethical work. You don't also romanticize the experiences. You have conversations with the community about their processes, their own timelines, their own readiness. Because sometimes, as scholars and as artists, we tend to romanticize, the concepts that we discover. So Columbus, so colonial, that we discover or encounter in the community. No? Parang, uy, may ganitong konsepto, publish, bakla. No, hindi pwedeng ganon. Hindi pwedeng ganon ang you don't only determine, participant ang community sa magiging outcome ng research mo sa kanila at ng creative practice mo sa kanila. They're part of that. And there might be, wag natin din naman, let's not also, parang, again, parang, there's intervention in what we do as scholars, di ba? We have to be very cognizant of that. We're not part of that community. You have to be very, very self-reflexive and critical of yourself, how you participate in the conversations in the community. So all of that, all of those things, conflict, love, minsan nagiging ninang kasakasal ng mga community partners, all of those shape into the kind of projects that the community decides with you. No? So very important yun. Very important yung self-criticality. Very important yung putting the community and their self-determination at pagpapasya, sariling pagpapasya, at the center of it. But, accompanied with that, let's not forget to talk about it in relation to their rights as well. The right to actually have the sariling pagpapasya or self-determination, to exercise culture so that they can take pride and be empowered by exercising it, by knowing that culture and their culture is a real tool and power in order to resist all the different political, economic, and even sometimes military conflicts that happens on the ground. And also development aggression. So culture is a real tool. It's a real power for that. So you have those conversations with the community as well. And you'll be surprised how much you're not only going to learn, but you're going to be shaped by the community. No, throw that scholar ego in your in the door of the community. Throw that. Edward Glissant will not say will not matter much. When you're talking to the ground. But keep that in mind, because those theoretical, those framework will help you curate. Will help you curate things. Will help you be guided, all these different philosophies, Western and local otherwise. Let's not also romanticize, that only indigenous bear importance, in the world. We are at a time that the world and the philosophies that we're exercising and dealing with is already a conglomeration of Western and local, like philosophy. So we cannot discard that. So we have to be very, put that at the back of your mind. But in the ground, put that at the back of your mind. And listen first, build relationship, like what Doc Grace is saying, but listening is also a very important method in being ethical with the communities. And this is what we're having a hard time to, because institutions have a different ideas of ethics as well. Naku, UP Manila, shout out. Ang tagapagtaguyod ng FREB, or Philippine Research Ethics Board. And sometimes as cultural workers, we do have, I always go back to this conflict of having this not only navigation, but outright sometimes conflict with institutional framework of what ethics is, of what funding is, of what resources are. But we just continue to practice. And I think the practice not only demonstrate how we can change in terms of perspective of looking at these things, but also, more importantly, how the practice is shaping a different community on the ground. And I think that's important in terms of talking about these concepts of ethics and practice of ethics.
Just one very quick question about time, because I was also interested what both of you said. I suppose you have to give it also time for these kind of processes to really have a real foundation, right? It's not something you can impose or sort of plan ahead so easily.
It will slap you on the face, Valentina. I am a director. I'm used to time. That is by the book. When you go to community, throw that out. And what we hate the most is that artists coming to communities and being parachute artists. You go to communities, you jam with them, you take pictures and say, oh, we're collaborating with communities, and then you get the hell out. What does that do? That's not unethical. That's really not ethical at all. You got your grant as an artist, you go to the communities, binalandra mo yung iyong press release that you're working with the communities, and then you don't go back to the community. You don't have the relationship that Doc Grace was emphasizing. That is unethical. So when you start working with communities, especially vulnerable ones, make sure that you have the time to do it. You have the heart and the time to do it. Because that parachute artist doesn't work. It's extractive.
Thanks, Roselle. I want to ask Ted about his experience. I mean, in what you were saying before, that young people are sometimes used, they have to be there, it looks good, but then are you guys really listened to? I mean, are you really part of the process? So how do you see this idea of care and of ways of working ethically for the type of work you do with young people?
Yeah. I think it's the same with Dr. Grace and Ms. Roselle, that we focus on relationship, especially the relationship of the youth. When we start our programs, we talk to our partners, and we don't label them as benefactors or just participants, but we collab with them. We want them to realize that this program or this project is owned by the both of us. This is not, you're not just participants or benefactors, because once we're done with this project, our pathways to sustainability is you, the community. That's why we focus on, for them to be empowered, we focus on equipping them with the skills and knowledge to do this without us. Because even before policies or rules, the communities are there already with their knowledge of taking care of the earth, taking care of one another. So we have to put that in mind also when we talk to them. So that's why we use theater as an approach when we go to the communities, because theater is an ecosystem that it's not just the artists, it's also the production. And we see ourselves that we are the producers, we are the people at the back, and you are the performers. And that's what we want to highlight, that especially for our volunteers, for the one in our organization, that when we go to the communities, we should not be in the spotlight. We should always be at the back, making sure that the spotlight is on the communities, not to us volunteers or leading or making the project. So that's what we focus on, is building relationship and making sure that even if we're not there in the community with the project, dealing with the project, is that we still have that relationship, and when we go back, we are still acknowledged, we are still being thanked because of what we did to these communities and the skills that we left because of the program that we did.
Thanks, Ted. Malu, you want to approach also this question a little bit from the perspective of your work?
Yeah, I keep on nodding my head. Okay, so several things were mentioned, like you have to build the relationship and you have to be able to commit to time. But what should underlie the relation? And so I think I would like to approach it as a gender advocate and as an activist at that. Reciprocity, care should not come from, feeling kind, no, or should not be born out of kindness, but it should be born out of justice. Okay, that's why I think Roselle mentioned about rights, being able to stand up for what is due them, and and in for the long haul. So I think you won't be able to devote time painstakingly if you do not believe that this relational aspect should be guided by a certain degree of being committed to human rights and social justice. Because otherwise, like what was mentioned by yeah, you treat them as quota. They have to be there for, maybe to satisfy funding requirements. Okay, so I think we go back to that. From the planning stage up to the time we evaluate. Like, based on my own experience also, working with with communities, no, not with communities, you have to factor in certain non-negotiables. Like when you ask them to come, you have to compensate the time because that's opportunity lost. What about those women who have caregiving responsibilities? So children must be taken care of. So let's say there are workshops, there are art workshops, there should be a space where children can be taken care of so they can devote their time. So all these things, these are, I would suppose, we are not being kind to them, but rather we operate on the level of this must be given if we really want, them to participate significantly. And fast forward, at the end of it all, we ask the question, so after our working with them, what changed? Or has the narrative shifted? For example, do they feel that their voices have been heard? Do they feel that on the basis of this, they could take it up and really fight for their own rights, even without us doing it for them? So I think at the end of the day, it is a back and forth. We consciously, painstakingly ask these questions, and we do not get tired. And it should be the air that we breathe if we want to be, how do you say that, to be part of this work for the long term. So that.
Thank you. Let's finish with you, Diego, on this question of care, work, ways of working. I don't know, because my experience with you, and I want to say this, is with this collective that you work with, Seeds. As I mentioned, Diego was with us 2 years ago, and him and another of your artists from the collective, they put together an installation that was amazing because it was really about communities. They came to Italy, they understood through us, I think, how to involve communities there, and they built something together. So this aspect for me was really, really interesting to see, but I don't know if you want to take this point of view.
Yeah, I can start from there. I think I want to talk about maybe 3 aspects of care, very briefly if I can. The first is around epistemic empathy and epistemological empathy. So the work that you saw us do, and just to recap for everyone, we worked with local residents of Trento in Italy, and we built over 2 days an installation called a biomod, where we have plants and computers and algae and digital games all come together. And in these installations, you have algae cooling the computers that are giving off heat, that are sustaining the plants, and the computers are running a game that people can play. And so the idea is that the more that people game, the hotter the computers get, which is better for the plants and for the algae. And so it was these kind of very hybrid, symbiotic ecosystems of, I suppose you could clearly say, care. And to achieve that kind of community, one needs to really be able to understand and put themselves in the shoes of another person, that which we know. But I think this even includes thinking about what other disciplines, how other disciplines think. And to this extent, I might even push back against what Malu had said about, art should not be for art's sake. Because going back to what Cheska said earlier, if we understand art to be something that is deeply embedded in everyday life to begin with, then to say that art should not be for art's sake would be to say that life itself should not be for life's sake, because our current operational understanding of art is really shaped by a specific historical context, right? Of the gallery tradition, of performance, of commodity. But moving more broadly, in academia, everyone talks about transdisciplinarity or interdisciplinarity. Everyone wants it. But the moment you get, a physicist and an engineer in conversation with each other, suddenly tensions will arise, much less someone from the humanities and from the sciences. One is too positivistic, you're too evidence-driven, it's too, the other is like you're not sourcing from lived experience from the body enough. One is going against cognition, the other is going for rationality. And until those two people can say, I understand where you're coming from, if I can yes and where you're coming from. So improvisational tools from theater, I think, are a really good way to get different disciplines to come together. So how do you care for other people whose epistemological framework is different from yours and maybe even contradict yours? The second is something around temporal empathy. I am very interested in science fiction, and I am very interested in deep time, and I am very interested in deep space and galaxies and in potentially exploring other universes, other galaxies, going to the stars. But for the longest time, I was thinking to myself, what relevance does this have to the lived realities of the majority world of the global south? But then I came across, many things, but one example was the work of a philosopher, Roman Krishnarik, who argues that if we don't care about future generations, those people who will live 10,000 years from now, then we would be committing an act of colonialization. We are colonizing the future because we are committing the same error, the same bias that the British colonizers of Australia had. They thought of Australia as terra nullius, empty land. If we don't think about the people 10,000 years from now, assuming that we're still alive, right? If we don't think about the people 10,000 years from now, we are committing a temporal, I can't remember his name, but like a belief that the future is similarly devoid of people. And so that was one kind of hook into why we, even in the Philippines, should think about 5,000 years from now. And the other is the growing work of indigenous artists and scientists. For example, the work of Dawn Marsden, she is indigenous. She's from one of the many nations of North America, and she wrote a book called Starship Citizens, and she argued why indigenous peoples would make the best astronauts and interstellar explorers. And so I think there's very interesting work to be done between indigeneity and the past and the deep future, and caring for that deep future, because even though we will not live to see it, it will happen nonetheless. And I think this loops back to what Roselle was saying about temporality and being slow. I don't expect any of the work that I do now, I don't expect to see the fruits of that labor in my lifetime. The work that I do now is about planting seeds and just trusting and hoping that future generations will come and reap the benefits.
Thank you, Diego. I think this links perfectly well to my third and last question, which is about future. And it's really about what we can do, as Diego was saying, looking ahead to future generation. Maybe mine was not so ambitious. I was going to ask you about the near future. But yeah, my question, I'm trying to wrap up, but this is really interesting. It's what can we take from now forward? So if we see this publication as a starting point and really a live tool, can you identify or can you think about one hope or one action or maybe one priority that you could look at or you could think of going forward from now? Who wants to start? Yes, please.
Sorry, is Rhea still here? Hi, yeah. Before, I really wanted to say this one still here. So, I wonder whether here?
Yeah,
I think we just need to turn off one, right? Yeah, that's it. Okay, thank you. So one of my goals, and one of the many benefits of working at the UP Open University, is that we have students from all across the Philippines and across the world, and we have such interesting reach. Our students, they can be in one class, but they live in Singapore and Canada and Agusan del Norte and Baguio and in Quezon City. And wouldn't it be interesting if we can use and leverage that power, our reach, as a framework to mainstream and capacitate everyone, I hate the word, capacitate everyone in design thinking. And this is where I'm coming from. As Roselle had hinted earlier on, it's not just artists, but activists are often parachuted into different places to solve the problems of others. But what if, every single citizen knew how to work with design thinking and borrow methodologies from, say, clinical medicine or clinical trials, like using N-of-1 methodologies, kind of basically using everything that we have at our disposal in terms of design thinking, creativity, and scientific exploration to improve the lives, not of like necessarily some community from far away, but their own family, their relatives, designing for your own loved ones, designing for your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your kapatid. And so this is the work that I've started doing with my students in my undergraduate classes, is encouraging them to see whether design thinking can work, designing some kind of learning tool for your wife. Using creative solutions to empower your family to be more exploratory, to be more creative, to take more risks. Because I think there is really interesting work in basically outsourcing the work of artists, designers, and scientists in the family life. So I would love to talk to anyone who's interested in it. This is a really, really, but in very early stages of what I'm interested in, but yun. Thank you.
Recruitment pala.
No, recruitment.
Recruitment. No, I'm as forward-looking as Diego, no, because in order for you to continue this hard work, you have to be a little bit romantic about it. You have to have that faith, no? And that faith in the uncertainty and what things will, happen in the future, but not knowing it really is also an exercise in humility. But I think, like what Diego is saying, and I think Diego is looking at it from a design thinking point of view, each of our imagination is grounded onto something. So for me, maybe I'm as crazy as Diego in proposing the performative and movement framework, because not everybody understands that. When you go to a supervisor, an engineer or whatever, you always, positivist framework in looking at things is always from a point of view, from a perspective. I refuse to do that. I love the idea of looking at things from a moving perspective, and in that moving perspective, we're able to not only be cognizant of our own impartiality and partiality in relation to the things that we actually pass through while we're moving, but also recognize our relationship to those temporal moments in order to think about what is and what is not. Important to think about what is not. Important to think about as much as presence and the outcome, also the absence, because it's in the absence as well, quote unquote absence. I'm labeling it as absence, but it can't, pwedeng hindi eh. Things that we cannot say, maybe we cannot see, like what Doc Grace was saying, spirituality, emotions, tacit knowledge, all those things that we don't necessarily are able to outrightly articulate rationally. No, those are very important ways of looking at how this world moves, and that's a very potent tool in order for us to understand also our actual relationship with things, with microbiomes, with environment, with the future. I think that's a very important framework to have, that you're not staying in a place for so long, and so you cannot analyze everything from a specific perspective. You're always moving, you're always straddling to different hats, you're always moving from one context to another, and so is your community. And I think I'm advocating that, as a more imaginative way of looking at things, to be able to understand what the movement of the earth, the movement of, like meandering through rivers, can help us gain on how to understand more, because positivist colonial thought and knowledge is always trying to pin everything down. And it's an exercise in humility, but also an imaginative way of looking at things. And I think that's where creativity comes from. Because creativity is not necessarily to me, an artistic expression of skills. But that threshold, that liminal space where you seem to have nothing and then you sort of, there's something. It's a simple but complex moment. So I think we have to tap into that unknown, to that moment more.
Grace, what's happening in the future? What can we do?
Future, okay.
Future.
Knowledge is already here. Resources are already here. That's why we are colonized, yeah? So what I would like to see is for the younger generation to engage with land-based knowledge holders. Because there's a lot of knowledge there that is just subjugated. But if you participate in that dialogue, put the indigenous science in conversation with modernist science, put cultural knowledge in conversation with, say, spiritual, political knowledge. You will find, for example, in the Babaylan, and I cannot get away from abstracting things when I talk about it. But in that particular figure, a living figure, not someone that disappeared a long time ago, but who is living, you will find in that person, you may find, probably not in everyone, but in that person, knowledge of medicine, that's science, knowledge of the unseen, that's religion, spirituality, knowledge of power in community, that's politics, knowledge of the arts through weaving. So there, in that one figure, you have interdisciplinarity in action. But if you only limit yourself to, I'm an academic too, to academic knowledge, it's so hard to integrate everything. But know that in indigenous experience, that interdisciplinarity is alive and well. But you have to be there. You have to be engaging in real time. You have to experience the context, be part of that living context. Now, indigenous knowledge is enhanced in dialogue by other forms of knowledges, and that is the bigger point. We have something to contribute, but others have something to contribute too. We are talking about sustainability that is a concern of the whole planet, not just humans. So we have to enter that dialogue in real time, in a sustained way. And a lot of the borders that divide us politically, religion-wise, class, gender, all of that, we may find the thread that connects us again as living beings trying to survive and thrive in this planet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Grace.
How do I follow that so beautifully worded? Anyway, so I would like to take off from the babaylan as an embodied concept, which is also gendered, and what the future, what the future looks like, and it's a fusion. So I think two words that came to my mind: relational and constituency building. So we keep on talking about this, and with all the hues, shapes, sizes. We may disagree, let the conversations happen, and then at some point maybe we can agree moving forward. And so to keep this going and put our resources to the things that we say. So as a practical step, maybe I'm thinking perhaps with the
project? Is there a project?
of course, if the chancellor will give me a go signal to it, but of course, maybe the Office of Gender Concerns can keep on having this conversation. So how do we continuously engender art, culture? Okay, so maybe we can, powwow and...
I love how bold you are. Committing the chancellor.
She's not convinced. You see, that's why...
Answer that performatively.
Yeah, because I was telling Rosel earlier, have we engaged our gender and development councils? our DRRM councils at the local level because they have the money, they have to utilize funds. And if they don't, somebody else will. And that's what is happening right now. And you know, sometimes when I sleep at night, I say to myself, something must be done. We hold them to account, right? That's one step. But also, let us create bridges where all these possibilities, maybe one step at a time, can come to fruition. So maybe we can do something around. By the way, Chansey, I'm part of the Regional God Council of Laguna, of region. Maybe we can do something around that, engage them. Yeah. So,
Very nice.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Malu. We'll take you on that. We'll come back and check with you guys in a few months. Ted, you wanna? Chancellor is okay. Record. Yeah, you're on record. You continue. And also live stream also.
Pwedeng balikan.
Let's finish with you, Ted, because I think we are running out of time and we want to also give some space to everyone to ask
Okay.
questions. Please.
Sige, so going back to the question, one action, especially with the Green Guide, we hope to localize the Green Guide, especially in our communities, and democratize it. Because, especially from the perspective of youth, there are things that we cannot understand. That's why it's one of the recommendations to really interconnect organizations between one another and talk about their experiences and talk about what's good or what's bad when we go to different communities, like the do's and don'ts, because the youth need it. And talking about going back to resources, it's not just about financial resources. The Green Guide is actually a good resource for us. This is where our facilitation will come in on how to ensure that the Green Guide will be directed to the communities, that the communities can really use the Green Guide for sustainability. And yes, relationship is also a resource that we need, especially the youth, especially from the older generation who has these lived experiences that can help the youth guide towards a correct pathway. And one hope that we want also, Sir Diego mentioned, think about 10,000 years in the future or 5,000 years. But on our end, just think about 100 years from now or even 50 years from now. The sad part is, in our circle, in our community, young people are opting not to, give birth anymore because they don't want to put a human being in a world that is, dying. So that's the concept, and it's saddening. That's why we focus on hope. If we want to make a future generation, because, I just realized that 5,000 years from now, what hits harder is that, how about 50 years from now, what will my child or their children receive from me because of my actions here right now. That's why I just would like to end this, that when we go to communities, even in our organization, we have this what we call the power of choice. You can always say no if this is good for you. You can always, if this is not a safe space for you anymore, then you can go out because that's for you as a member of the community. But when you say yes, I would like to end this with a quote. This is from Climate Reality also, that on the final no, there comes a yes, and on that yes, the future world depends. So I hope that we say yes to advancing the Green Guide, advancing different sustainability efforts, not just for ourselves, but for the youth, because we don't want that notion anymore that the youth are the leaders of the future. The youth are the leaders of now. We are partners now, we are collaborators, and we are here, and we want to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. I think this is perfect way to wrap up this conversation. And now it's up to you to ask questions. So I don't know how much time we have, but I will maybe ask Raisa. I don't know who's going to go around with the question. Okay. Any questions for our speakers? Please don't be shy.
Check.
If you can just stand up and say your name, thank you.
Abby. Hello. You mentioned earlier. I just want to ask if something accepted or considered by the NCIP.
Can you repeat? Sorry, because it was kind of coming and going. If you
I'll just go near. Yes, hello. Okay, now, you mentioned earlier in your talk that the community-based ethics protocol that you've developed with the group. Yes? Okay, now I just want to ask whether it's something accepted or at least considered by NCIP.
Sa FPIC, merong provision. There's a provision there particularizing on community initiatives. The NCIP recognizes that because the self-determination, again, is still primary to the granting of the FPIC. So to a degree, yes, they recognize it as an exercise of community initiation. Because the community initiated it. However, if that is going to be part of the procedure later on for asking FPIC, I don't think the NCIP really encourages that type of procedure, because there's also a lot of researchers and artists who go to the community directly and are unethical. So I'm not talking about NCIP, but that's one of the things that the Research Ethics Board, for instance, tries to at least examine if the researcher or the artist's methodology in terms of data gathering is adhere to human ethics, particularly human ethics protocol. So, but yeah, they recognize it as community initiative. I think a lot of the REBs, Research Ethics Board, and publications as well recognize it, and also funders from here and abroad recognizes if the community grants an FPIC to a project or a community. It's a less complex process. I think Doc Grace talked about it already, so it's just really based on 3 principles. Magbigay, magpaalam, ask permission, manghingi ng paalam sa mga information, parang ganyan. Ask permission is different from asking for information. So, but also the ethical responsibility that what you're asking from them is not going to be used, to harm. So that's part of, I think, indigenous knowledge that shape this ethics protocol. So when you participate in knowledge production, you have to ensure that it's always in consultation with them. If the information is going to harm them or anybody. So that's a negotiation.
Hi, I'm a former teacher, DepEd, sa Alternative Learning System po, 2017. Meron kaming project sa DepEd Quezon na kung tawagin ay Kalilayan. Yung mga teacher natin sa Alternative Learning System, pumupunta dun sa mga tribe. Ako kasi ay, kalimitan po doon sa Quezon ay, kagaya po ng Dingalan ay mga Dumagat tribe. Ngayon, ang gusto kong itanong, kasi naririto ang mga researcher, At itanong namin, yung DepEd Quezon, yung Kalilayan, project yun ng province of Quezon. Ngayon, ang sa nakikita ko, kasi wala na po ako doon 5 years ago. I'm residing in Canada now. At nagbabakasyon lang po ako. Pero yung heart ko para doon sa mga indigenous people ay andoon pa din. Kasi po ako po ay mismong tumira doon sa mga dumagat. At lahat po ng sinabi nyo ay totoo. Kasi tumira ako, kumain ako sa kanilang pamingganan. At narito po nga pala ang aking tourism officer ng mga panahong iyon. Retired na siya, si Miss Annie Calleja. Ayan po yung mga kasama. Kasama ko po talaga siya. Siya yung nagbigay sa akin ng ano. Nung bagong-bagong teacher ako, talagang wala kasing mag-commit sa mga tribo doon. At bago rin yung project na yun ng DepEd, ako ang napapunta doon, ako napa-assign. At nabuwanan ako bago pumunta doon sa pinakabayan. Talagang tumira ako doon. Kaya po alam na alam ko yung sinasabi nyo. Ngayon, ang tanong ko sa mga researcher, kasi kalimitan, pupunta ang mga researcher, I'm sorry to say, na pinag-aaralan nyo lang sila. And after that, hindi na kayo bumabalik. Pagkatapos nyong kunin ang gusto nyong makuha. Yun po talaga ang totoo. Ngayon ang dami nyo doon sa Quezon, sana ibigay din natin, mag-seminar tayo sa mga teacher mismo na napunta doon sa community. Ang ano ko po ay, paano po kaya bigay tayo ng tulong sa kanila? Kasi ang dami yung na-research, na-itala na, at napakagaganda. Mismo, siguro magkakatulungan kung pareho ma-entice na mabuti. Sa totoo lang po, nagpapasalamat ako kay Miss Annie kasi sa cultural and arts, ako ay na-involve. Kaya nabuksan yung isip ko dito, hindi lang dahil para magturo. And then also, I'm also a missionary din. Nagtugma-tugma siya. And then, naisip ko na kailangan din ng mga teacher mismo na sa DepEd, lalo na sa alternative learning system, kung saan talagang pumupunta sila doon, ay matutunan ito. Gusto ko pong sabihin sa inyo paano po kaya makikipag-ugnayan tayo sa kagaya po namin doon sa province of Quezon. Yun lang po.
Meron po akong isang maikling sagot. I have one quick response, and then I'm sure actually my co-panelists will be able to give parang more relevant answers. Ang isang challenge ngayon, one of the big challenges is for universities to understand what their role is in society, in Philippine society. Because over the hundreds of years, universities have changed from parang bearers of secular knowledge to parang to becoming teaching institutions, to becoming research institutions, and now they're supposed to be drivers for economic change. At dahil doon, ang nangyayari, at some point in the past, naging priority ang publications, ang research. Ang masasabi ko lang po is, sa Universidad ng Pilipinas, iba po sa amin, alam na ito at kailangan talaga itong i-address. Dahil kung hindi natin to may address, patuloy na mangyayari po yung sinasabi nyo. So some of us are trying our best. Yun lang po masasabi ko ngayon.
That's a concrete lack that we need to bridge. The knowledge that's being produced in these universities, for instance. Tapos yung bagal ng dissemination. Because as you know, in scholarship, merong process of verification, but there's also, like what Diego said, there's a growing and emerging advocacy for practice-based research, practice-led research, practice as research. And I think I want to think that Diego and I are part of that group of scholars that advocates that interdisciplinarity, but also work that is grounded on practice, and practice actually is considered as research. And in those conversations, you can have mas maraming mga venues for conversations. Pero sa totoo po, it's so limiting to work with DepEd, and I have to say it, no? No, kasi po NCCA, for instance, has a program, no, the dealing, and I used to teach with that, and really, the gap of knowledge is malayo po, no, and it's really framing, no. Nako, magagalitan ako ng nanay ko na galing sa DepEd. But yung pong pedagogy kasi ng DepEd minsan, no, it particularizes on methods rather than perspectives. Yes, no? So, yun pa lang po, that's so hard to really bridge, no? So marami po, no? But with us, I think with our organizations, we are working with teachers din po in the local area. We're not there to train them because we're not there as university professors, but part of our projects is always to start with orientation and training and ethics and all that. So when we open those conversations to the community, invited all of the constituents in that community, including teachers in the area. So that's how we were able to kind of address some of those gaps. And we're hoping that the teachers that actually work in the community will be able to cascade those experiences and learnings from the community. Pero you know po, sometimes it's really hard because the institutions, the DepEd will, like with us in the university, we want to have all these different types of publications, you know. Rethink about publication, resist tyranny of the text, yung mga ganyan. But when it comes to point system, I don't know with Diego, but with us, we're in the bottom of the merits. And we understand that teachers had to deal with that kind of navigation as well in order to, you know, be able to be more economically equipped then, you know, through the learning, through being teachers. So it's always kind of a hard battle.
Yeah, we have one, I think we can just accommodate, one question, but after that we can still talk. Please.
Good afternoon. I'm Henry Estepona from Tagdon, Barcelona, Sorsogon, Mangrove Farm. It's a farm-to-table resort. I am here in Manila because I just attended a solar panel conference at Lido de Paris Hotel at Binondo. And one of the result issues that being discussed there is they are willing to install solar panels all over the Philippines, off-grid, even to the remotest island. So how can we partner with this body? Another thing, last December, one of the granddaughter of John F. Kennedy, former president of the U.S., had succumbed to a cancer. And one of his legacy is she was a sustainability officer all over the world, and she even had a book about the profile of courage, same with her grandfather. And one of his topic that is in constant battling with his uncle, who happens to be the Department of Health of U.S. America, is she is pro-cancer research, and she's also on the blue oceans, because according to her, the one that been used for her bone marrow replacement is a of a research which happened to be developed by the University of California. And it is a sponge like a snails coming from the Mediterranean that was developed during 1956. My question is, how does Premier University of the Philippines stand for the Manila Bay reclamation? Because it's just walk away. Thank you po.
I can answer.
Okay.
Let me answer this in a broader level that connects to what we've been talking about. I think what your question points to is the need for artists and scientists to be able to talk to each other and find opportunities to collaborate. So that all sorts of, because there are lots of really interesting art science work that deal with medical issues or biology or ecosystems, and artists do some really compelling, moving works, and that's, I think, one of the highlights of what art can do. It can move us into action. So that's how I would generally respond to your question. If anyone else wants to respond, I think, is this, yeah, do we have time for more questions?
Yeah, or if anyone else? No? Yeah.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone.
I'm sorry. I think just this is the last question we're going to take. Sorry, because I think we're running out of time. But after this, informally, you can come and talk to our speakers.
Very
Please.
quickly lang, since this question got to do with, I don't feel slighted, I'm from DepEd, we're from Cebu, and with me the student researchers. One point, earlier we're discussing that you would like to share and involve to the youth. Can we partner with you? We can host you. We have students whom we can gather and attend. I guess, and I believe that would be the first concrete thing that we can do after this event. I'm willing to do that. We were able already to start of this month, organize a Love for Country, and perhaps this kind of roundtable discussion, because us from Cebu never really have this kind of opportunity where we open the landscape and the framing of the mind of the senior high school students who would eventually be the ones who would till into that kind of direction. And I challenge you to put all those things that we have been discussing here, let's put that into action. Let's partner. I'm with Mandaue City Comprehensive National High School, the biggest high school in Mandaue City. So we have students, more than 5,000 students. We can start with that. And I believe with all the things we've been discussing here, we can start putting that into action. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone who wants to take on the challenge? Or any comments before we wrap up? Anyone? No? Good? Okay. Well, thank you so much. This was really a good way to finish, I think, and it really propels us towards the future. I don't want to spend time to try and condense in a few words what all the speakers talked about, because it's impossible. Maybe I'll just say that from my point of view, what I really felt was extremely interesting, and that really came up and came through from the discussion, is that we need to create more bridges in terms of intermediaries, facilitators, people like the people who are sitting here, who are really connecting everybody, every one of us, communities, it's all of us together, and maybe governments, those who make the policies, those who use different languages. So I feel that the role of intermediaries is essential in everything that we discussed. And then in terms of really giving time to processes to come about is maybe something that I also felt very strongly came out of this conversation. From my point of view, I also wanted to stress the fact that this is about the Philippines, but it's also about the rest of the world. And I think some of the challenges, some of the points that you raise are really hopefully also resonating with the people who are hopefully online listening to us from other parts of the world. And I think that this is a good starting point also to build bridges outside of the countries, because sometimes you find that other people in other part of the world are really also facing the same concern, the same challenges, and when it comes to sustainability, as you rightfully said, Grace, it's really something that concerns all of us. So I will just stop here, and I would like to really thank all of you, great speakers, for really being here today. And please stay with us and, you know, take advantage of the fact that they're here to engage in conversation with them after this part is finished. Thank you so much for being here and taking part in this conversation. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I don't know. Are we done? Or?
May we request everyone to stay in front? Okay. What a very, very impactful discussion. Before we proceed with the certificates, we would like to acknowledge joining us today in person is Honorable Robert Lester Aranton, Alumni Regent of the UP System, representing the University President of Laguna State Polytechnic University Los Baños Campus, Mr. Christopher Mendoza. Thank you very much for joining us today on site. And joining us online is Assistant Vice President for Academic Affairs, Faculty Development, Ian Kendrich Fontanilla. And also joining us online, Dr. Michelle R. Palumbarit, Director of UP CFAL. And now, it's time to show our appreciation to our wonderful speakers. I'd like to invite Chancellor Joan Serrano and ASEF Director Valentina to join us as we present a certificate and token of appreciation to our esteemed speakers. Allow me to read the citation. The University of the Philippines, Open University, presents this certificate of appreciation to Professor Diego S. Maranan, Rizal Pineda, Grace Nono, Ted Villanueva, and Assistant Professor Maria Lourdes T. Jarabe for serving as resource speakers during the Creative Pathways to Sustainability, a launch and roundtable on the Green Guide for the Philippines held this 9th of February at the UP Manila Museum of a History of Ideas. Given this 9th day of February at the UPM headquarters, Manila, Philippines. Signed, Joan Serrano, UPOU Chancellor, and Valentina Decardi, ASEF Culture Department Director. So let's take a picture for this event. And yes. We would also like to take this opportunity to present our certificate of appreciation to Valentina Ricordi for serving as a moderator during this launching event. Let's take it. Thank you once again for being here. Let's give a warm round of applause to our speakers. To formally close our program, it's my pleasure to invite once again the ASEF Culture Department Director, Ms. Valentina Ricordi. Let's give her a warm round of applause.
I think I misunderstood and I had already given my closing remarks earlier. So I don't want to keep too much of your time. I think I already mentioned before that a few points that really resonated with me were about creating bridges in terms of intermediaries, organization and people work with communities, with governments to try and create a language that is common to everyone. So I think I will stop here. There will be also, I think, an article that will be published together with our recording, possibly next week. So please keep an eye out for that, and I think we will also summarize a few of the key points from our speakers during the recording and with the article. Thank you very much, and again, thank you very much to UPOU for inviting us to Manila. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much for the closing remarks. And with that, we've reached the end of our program. We appreciate everyone's participation and enthusiasm today. Before we wrap up, we kindly ask everyone to take a moment to complete our short event evaluation form. You can access it using the QR code and link that are currently flashed on the screen. Your feedback is invaluable to us and helps improve our future events. Please note that you receive an e-certificate once you've completed the evaluation form. It may take 5 to 10 business days for you to receive it, so we do ask for your patience. On behalf of UPOU and ASEF, we want to extend our heartfelt thanks to everyone who joined us today, both in person and virtually. We truly appreciate your participation. Please, for those who are attending on-site, please stay at the venue, and for those attending in Zoom, please still stay in the Zoom, as we will still have a photo opportunity to immortalize this event. Once again, I'm Mary Christine Clarino, and this has been the launching of the Green Guide for the Philippines. Please stay tuned to our social media pages for more UPOU events. We have some exciting contents coming up that you wouldn't want to miss. Maraming salamat po. Again, we'll still have a photo op, and thank you once again for being with us today. So let's just watch this video and then we'll have the photo up. Okay, so for the photo opportunity, may we request everyone to please come in front. Ano lang, stay seated, but compress a little bit, yes. Ayan.